Yeah, here we go. Today we're going to be talking about dividing evergreen and wintergreen perennials and why we're doing that and that sort of stuff. I'm Aaron Selby. I'm the production supervisor here at Plant Delights.
Hello.
Very nice to meet you again. All right, we're going to talk about evergreens. I think last year we talked about dividing perennials in wintertime that were dormant. This is a different ball of wax. This is plants that we absolutely have to do this time of year. If we try and do them in the summertime, in the southeast anyhow, we run into complications with transplant shock and just numbers going down of success rate. So Doug was very nice to offer up a rhodia. What I'm looking at is what plants are doing. Are they going into active growth? That sort of stuff. If I saw this happening in summertime, I would probably be more prone to doing my division at that time. However, walk around and check your plants out and see what time they're breaking bud, that sort of stuff. Some plants don't give you any clues, like a Muhlenbergia. The only time you can actually divide this genera is through the cool season. So we actually will start in about October and only divide through about March. And that's usually the cutoff. In the garden, absolutely the bare bones of winter. The worst time you could think of is actually the most successful time. So for Muhlenbergia as a genera. So we're going to do that one exclusively in the wintertime and the cool season. Another genera that we do primarily during the cool season are Carex. All right. I'm a big proponent of this plant. It's a great restoration plant. There's lots of great natives. There's some that can take full sun in the summertime. Wintertime, they're at nice evergreen, but you have to divide them through the cool season only. When I first moved here, I tried dividing them. I think it was like June, and they did all right, but they did not thrive, and I wondered why, and that was a big thing there. So there are also plants that we're going to do just because the transplant shock is a little bit less harsh on the plant. If you notice, it's also a really nice little basil tuft. This is a native. This is our Silene virginica called Jackson Valentine. It's a beautiful plant, but it's a real bugger to divide. Know the plant that you're getting into. Try and understand how it grows before you dig it up, that sort of stuff. This plant has taught me a lot of lessons of how vigorous you can be with a plant and how vigorous a recovery will be if you do get too aggressive. These are very difficult. A lot of times you look at a plant like this and it looks very divisible. There's lots of new growth offsets. But once you dig it up, you'll kind of see that everything kind of comes from one growth point, and these nice new growth points out here don't have any new roots. So what you have to do is simply come in and sort of split the crown and root zone where it shares. That's typically how we do Silene divisions, and I typically only do them through the cool season. Absolutely 100% failure once it gets warm. So, yep. We're also going to look at like winter interest bulbs. These are little allium allies. This is Nothoscordum celoum. Great plant. Winter green. I love to mix these in turf grass around here. That sort of stuff. Try and spruce up people's yards a little bit. They're a little tiny bulb. This is something we would do as they're growing. So we do that this time of year. And we're also gonna grab Iphion. That's another allium ally. It's winter interest. These are all things that break dormancy. Typically fall, grow through the winter months, and are going dormant by June. Here's a nice little spring ephemeral. Typically do divisions on this. Right now, these are blooming a little early because they've been out of the garden. I was just out in the woods up by Falls Lake and saw these just breaking dormancy right now. So they're tiny, tiny little leaves. Actually, it's kind of like a nice time to get them because you don't have all this abundance of foliage to deal with. So I'll do those as well. This is also something, I know it's not in the lecture, but I primarily do leaf cuttings on this plant, believe it or not. It actually is how I produce a lot of those bulbs. So yeah, you just never know what's going to happen. So when I first found out that you could do that, it's in the ranunculaceae, I believe. So I think that they're very easy to do that way. So that's how that goes. All right, cool. Let's discuss dividing perennials. So this is a freshly dug clump of rhodia. You have to be careful when you're doing garden divisions. If it's something like my garden or here at Plant Delights, look for where you may have some other genera creeping into what you want to play with, all right? So always be on the lookout for that sort of stuff. My garden is heavily textured, so I find that this happens in my yard a lot. All right, so I'll be digging up, I think last year I was digging up Zephyranthes and found Eupatorium greigi. I just all through it. So yeah, and that's something I would root propagate, so I have to be very careful and kind of tease the two apart so I don't have a ton of Eupatorium breaking up in my new Zephyranthes patch. So just be on the lookout. A couple things that we use to get the plant to this stage would be some garden digging tools. I love these little bamboo spades. They're very easy. You can beat the heck out of the end of them, and they just kind of pop smaller perennials. Obviously, if you're getting into big clumps of things, like some big ruscus out in the garden, or even the Muhlenbergia, a nice sharp, clean spade is what I use. Once I get it up and I'm looking at dividing, love these Ginsu knives. They're cheap, they're replaceable. I think there's a warranty on them, so you just give them back when you've beat them up. And that's what, hey, if somebody's gonna do it, you gotta use it. So for smaller stuff, I like these little battle axes. These things work good. Just kind of digging up and then loosely popping plants. It just depends on what I have. I always use a nice pocket knife or some sort of little grafting or divisible tool. Nice thing to have. What's that?
I just got one.
Yeah, I mean, I go through knives like crazy, to be honest. And then the last thing I always use are typically a nice sharp pair of pruners. The thing I can't emphasize enough is that everything is really, really sharp and really, really clean. We sterilize everything once again with fire here. At home in the garden, I like to use just a Bic lighter. I carry it in my little holster or in my pocket, and that way as I'm going through the garden, I can clean up in between plants, that sort of stuff. It's really important because it really is easy to mess things up. So just kind of clean things up really fast. And that will burn it, and then basically I take it to the sink and I usually will quench it real quick, so it'll temper it real quick. So excuse me. Usually we have a little bucket of water there, and that's that. All right, cool. So nice sharp tools that are really clean are very important.
Question.
Huh?
Does the heat treatment ruin the temper on the steel?
No, that's why I just quenched it. So I run it through some cool water afterwards to bring it back down. So if I was to do that, I use high-grade steel too. These are Okatsuna pruners. They hold up really, really, really good, and they keep a very good sharp edge. So I love that brand. These pruners, believe it or not, are probably 7 or 8 years old, and I use them professionally every day for how many times cuts, divisions? Yeah, lots and lots. Yeah, they're as old as this crusty old holster. So, all right. Yeah. So, we dug these plants up. When do you dig up plants? That's a big thing, you know. Typically, I like to kind of watch the weather. Obviously, we just went through a snowstorm and our ground is still kind of frozen. Obviously, I can't do any divisions for any time. However, going into our snowstorm, we had some really nice weather and we had some nice rains following. So what I like to do is kind of look at the weather, see where I can manipulate or take advantage of the rain and the temperatures and that sort of stuff. Snow might be a little harsh on some divisions and that sort of stuff. So I will calculate how some plants will definitely react with a big pile of fresh snow on them versus a plant that can certainly take it like this or that. So I might hold off on doing like tiny little soft, delicate cardamom cuttings or stuff like that until I have a little bit nicer window to play with. But I'm always trying to take advantage of free watering and time that I don't have to babysit my divisions afterwards. One of the good things with wintertime is we don't have the excessive heat, so the plants really don't go through that really big transplant shock, which is really nice. However, I still do follow the same principles. I like to keep everything in portions of an hourglass. Big roots, you know, to tops. Keep that perfectly symmetrical and you usually are going to succeed. So if I'm going to cheat once again, I always want more roots than tops. Some plants in like a little container like this, I'm not going to cut this back a ton, you know. However, if it's like a Carex, I can do a little bit more of a cutback. So Ruscus, a little less cutback. It just depends on the plant, so and timing. But nonetheless, we'll dig these things up. And one thing I'm always looking for is new eyes, new growth, good fracture points, points where you might get a little bit of cleavage or wobbling. Some of these things are really easy to divide by hand. As you can see, you can kind of just grab some parts and you'll see where it naturally wants to break. So I'm going to pull this nice running fern out of here. That is beautiful. That is chonky fern. That is a big fern. I'm going to have to say, wow, I'd like to see what that actually grows into. So I'm just going to simply pull these apart and I'm going to see where I can break these off. Now outside I would give these a good rinse to open up where I could see where I may have some new eyes and that sort of stuff. If you also notice here real quick, we've got where the new foliage is coming up. When I start to see this, rhodias I start dividing usually around December. I love gardening around Christmas, that sort of stuff. So usually here I will start looking at dividing my big clumps of rhodias, that sort of stuff around them. So
is it too late now?
No, we're still in wintertime. I just start then. I'm not out in my garden every weekend, so I've got a lot of catch up and there's a lot of divisions. So I'm going to simply break these down. What I'm looking for typically are really nice new white roots at the tip of the plant. This one isn't really in active root growth at the moment, or when it was dug, it got a little bit of root sculling or pruning. It's not a problem. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to reduce that foliage. And I'm going to just simply come in with my nice, clean, sterilized pruners, and I'm going to cut those up. I'm going to take out any of this funky old foliage, and I'm going to leave it just like that. Once again, I put that proportion back a little more symmetrically. When I plant this, if it's going into a garden hole again, I'm going to prepare the soil, that sort of stuff, till it up nice and loose, make any adjustments you need to make. And that sort of stuff. So we got that. We can technically break these down into itty bitties if I had to. And this one looks like it may not have had any sprouting or buds. So I'm actually going to leave a good chunk of this foliage. It may be a bit tardy. So if I was to cut all this out, now I've postponed that tardy bud from breaking. I find that even if you just leave a few leaves, that additional bit of chlorophyll will enhance the new growth, the break. The other thing is we're breaking up rhizomes here. I've also found that dividing rhizomes, until you divide these individually, a lot of the dormant buds and stuff will just stay dormant. So once you crack them, put that rhizome and root system and dormant buds on their own system, that's when you start to see additional growth. So that's also an important part of dividing older clumps of plants that may be losing a little bit of vigor. So in this case, no new buds here, so I'm going to leave that. Now, I don't mind coming through and reducing maybe a couple of these to reduce some stress, but I think I'll leave a good majority of it. Even if it's damaged or whatever, it might look a little ugly. Just wait till it reflushes and go back to it.
So you wouldn't separate those two there?
Now, it depends on what aesthetic I'm looking for in my garden. So here, if I'm talking about production numbers, yeah, I'm gonna divide them as long as I look at this division. Once I clean up all the root system here, if I see that there's actually roots on that plant and I make that cut, yes. If I pull this back and I see that most of the root system is attached to this big mama, I'm just gonna leave it. Or I'm gonna cut into mama a little bit and take a bit of her root system. Yeah, it all depends on the plant, but typically, once again, I like to keep the roots to top portion, so I'll analyze that before I make any cut. But yeah, once again, I'm just going to keep it as is, just so it will reflush as well. So if you're dealing with stuff like this, where once you get it off and you find that a majority of it was this massive fern running through it, I'm going to take this back because it has the new bud. I'm gonna come back through and I'll clean this up a little bit, but not a terrible amount. And in the garden, it really doesn't matter. So some of them, you may just have some accidental break off, that sort of stuff. This is a good portion. It's not the prettiest plant, but by June, you'll have a really nice bright leafed rhodia out in the garden. May not be the largest off the get-go, but after about 2-3 years, it'll probably be looking, you know, not quite that big, but maybe like that. So we'll take things down like that. Sometimes you don't need to do anything but keep a clump like this. Out in the garden, I would probably just do this and simply a one-cut method. Clean these up a little bit and go from there, take back any foliage, and then just replant nice little clusters like this. A lot of times my rhodias are about this big around in clumps. So I'll keep them nice and clumped like this and spread them out as far as I want to go. So it depends on how aggressive you want to get. All right, the next thing we're gonna talk about are some of the seasonal divisions. So once again, we're gonna come back to Muhlenbergias. These typically, when I'm dividing them in the ground, I'm using a big, long spade. I gotta get up under them. They're usually in really soggy, nasty areas. So the easiest thing to do is get a high pressure garden hose if you have something like that. And once you dig that thing up, rinse as much of the mud and the native soil off of the soil, or off the roots, so then you can get in there and actually see what you're dividing. Luckily, I don't have to do that. I have a nice little pot here. I've kind of got Martha Stewart on it. I pre-divided it, but basically what I'm looking for is, once again, spinning it around. I'm looking for new growth. How aggressive do I want to get with this? If this is something like a nursery that produces this, they're going to break these down into individual little growth points and grow them off. For us in the garden, or even here in the nursery, I'm not going to get so crazy with it, but what I would typically be looking for is a nice fracture point once again, and seeing where it could come apart. I like to divide from up underneath the plant crown and dig through the root system a little bit like this. So what happens is when you do pull it apart, you don't have any damaged eyes and stuff. I see a lot of people just sort of take the spade right through the crown. That's fine if you want, but you're actually doing a lot of damage there, and unnecessarily, just because you're not willing to take 10 minutes. I mean, you've already grown this plant for so long, you may as well put just that little bit of extra time in there. So once again, what I'm looking for are new growth points. That's usually the most important part. And then something like this, I'll show you what I was talking about. I'm gonna just come up underneath the root system like this when I divide. And I would do the same thing if I had a big shovel outside. So, and then I'm just gonna simply pull these apart. And when you divide from the underside, once again, you keep all the integrity of the eyes. There's absolutely no damage. So if you look up close, there's a ton of them. And once again, you can get ultra aggressive or you can keep them in nice little clumps. I typically like to divide things into like thirds or halves. Gives you a little bit more recovery. Come back maybe in another couple years, do the same thing, and just play the long haul for divisions. I like a lot of masses and stuff like that, and this is a very inexpensive way to do it.
I haven't cut mine back yet, so would I do that before I started?
So at the time of, if you wanted, and that's a great thing. Once again, we're going to try and keep the portion of root, so it depends. I know a lot of people use fire, but I think that that's fun and everything, but typically,
Might not be legal.
yeah, you know, with this grass, it absolutely loves it. But what I would do here is typically, if you notice, there's sort of a portion of my fist that's like that. So I typically might go up slightly above that, somewhere right around here. It doesn't need to be exactly that. You have a little bit of leeway. So with this foliage being so fine like this, there's going to be very little stress on the plant. If you have stuff that's a lot more broadleaf, it's definitely going to wilt a little bit. So in this case, yeah, I'll take the top out, take the top, you know, third, 2/3 out of it at the time of division. Just put the portions back, and you're good to go. If I'm dividing, typically wouldn't be dividing my ornamental grasses right now, maybe in another couple months, but yeah, that's how we'll go about the Muhlenbergias. All right. Some of the nastiest plants we grow are ruscus. They are called commonly as butcher's broom. I grabbed the nicest one that we have on purpose. Some of them you just simply touch like this and it is as sharp as a holly, I would say. When I dig these in the garden, once again, we're digging up a nice rhizomatous crown. There's typically really, really good sections. I'm gonna have to get, all right, so beautiful, healthy root system, right? We're looking at that. I want really nice white tips, and here you see that really up close. There's a good fibrous root system as well as a coarse root system, good root fibers all over these pieces. So you can kind of, they're fuzzy. That's a great sign that the plant is actually active, and it's a perfect time to divide. What I'm looking at is a rhizome system. They can be a little bit woody at times. When I dig this, once again, I'm probably going to use a slightly larger shovel. This plant, full size in the garden, is probably about yay tall, and will take up an area that's probably like 4x4, 5x5 over time. Here in the pot, we're going to just say I had a nice little small division. I'm gonna loosen this up and expose as much as I can. Yeah, you don't have to be nice to plants. Plants are, I mean, yeah, it's nice to be you be nice to them in the ground, but when you're propagating, don't be afraid to be rough. They have a will to live, believe it or not. So what I'm going to do is, once again, analyze how aggressive I want to be. For production's sakes, I would probably take this down to maybe like 3 divisions. What I'm looking for are really nice growth points all the way around it. I'm looking at the root portions, that sort of stuff. You can see where it was divided previously, possibly out of a garden division or even a pot division. And all of this was probably the main piece. This is all new stuff on the outside, of course. So, how do you go about dividing this? Same exact way. I'm always looking to avoid going through the top. So with a hose or even a little garden bucket full of like some water, like this time of year, it's nice. I'll bring out some like nice warm water, not cold water, and it's kind of nice to play in when you're out in the garden to warm up a bit. So what I'm going to do here is kind of see if there's any naturally fracturing points, and if you look, that bugger wants to pull apart like right through this area.
Huh.
Okay, so most divisions will tell you where they wanted.
Bandy and wobbly.
Yeah, exactly. You just kind of massage them gently and they will just fall apart in your hands most of the time. That probably not. The other thing is you have to be careful that you're not heavy-handed like me, but don't be afraid. You're going to have some damage no matter what. So just be a little bit more gentle. Sometimes you can twist them apart. Sometimes I'm just going to have to figure out where they're attached and get back in with my pruners that I've sterilized. I should have got some more water. So let's see. I got that here. Actually, I have water right here. We were sexing ferns the other day and I had that sitting around.
Why not use alcohol?
It doesn't sterilize. That's why. It only surface cleans. And bleach is a little too harsh. We could use stuff like Xeritol. It's basically a concentrated hydrogen peroxide, but once again, it's really rough and stuff like that. So last time I checked, nothing survives that, right? So that's why I do that also. And it's cheap. I mean, all those chemicals, it's no fun carrying around everything. But a lot of people do use alcohol, unfortunately, just like surface cleaning things. You won't kill things like anthracnose or anything else. Pythium root rot, all that sort of stuff you can get and spread. So what we're going to do is get back to this and see where it wants to divide. I'm going to come up underneath it once again. On this side, we're just going to simply cut that rhizome and pull these apart. So, how aggressive do I want to be? In the garden, those would be beautiful clumps, right? I want a nice recovery. I've got 3-4 eyes and buds that are all breaking. So this is really, really nice little clump. In the garden or in the nursery, these might be a little bit large for pots for the long haul. They may not thrive as well. Believe it or not, I can take them down probably this one more time in half, and those will be really nice plants, as you can see, in about a year. So very, very nice recovery rate on that. So that's how I would do ruscus. Everybody loves growing Dene racemosa. That is the technique right there. So once you get that plant, usually about every 5 to 6 years, because it's so slow, you know, you'll get a clump about yay big. I can probably get 150, 200 divisions out of them. So play the long haul, and then it's on. The seedlings are a great way to go, but I mean, seedlings take time.
Yeah.
Ruscus seedlings take time.
So expensive.
Exactly. And the beauty of divisions is instant recovery of full-size plants for the most part, you know. So if they're done at the right time of year, you're going to expect at least a 10% loss no matter what. That's usually like a normal rate of, I usually calculate, that's on the high end.
10%.
Yeah, 1 out of 10 plants dying out of your divisions, it's not too bad, so.
Can I ask for, say, a Danae or maybe a Carex or something if it's big? Okay, like let's say I've got a Everillo that's
Yeah.
it's huge now.
Yep, I'm
okay?
sure it is.
Instead of digging up the whole thing, could you dig up like one side of it so that you could
Yeah.
get into it and get
Yeah.
under it and then break out some
For
parts, like
sure. There's actually a video of Tony just digging up our new Muhlenbergia species out of the dry welcome bed, and he's in there with an axe and literally just like crunching the thing and hacking at it and then just pulling out chunks off of the side and leaving the remaining clump. Sometimes where you have a plant like that particular Muhlenbergia, it's like a bamboo. It gets really hard as a rock. So sometimes you're left with no other option. In that case,
Do what you must do.
yeah, exactly. In that case, it's like, how bad would I want that plant? In Tony's case, he wants to get it out to everybody. It's a really cool plant. I mean, it throws everybody off that it's a Muhlenbergia to start. But yes, you could definitely do that. And we'll see how that plant recovers. I've never seen that particular method on that plant. We just started propagating it. So, you know, like I said, you can be pretty rough with plants. It just depends on your expectations of how things are going to transplant, stuff like that. I typically am rough with plants, but at the same time, I'm looking for like key things like healthy roots, good eyes, that sort of stuff. So if you're breaking off just say like a small section of a grass or something to give somebody, sure. Yeah.
Yeah, or in my case, just because the garden area it's in is small and it's gotten way bigger than I ever thought it would get.
Yeah.
And now it's crowding out other things.
Yeah.
I could just reduce the size of it.
Yeah.
And then plant those.
You need some
pieces
rabbits.
somewhere
They keep mine trimmed really well. Yeah, they love the Everillo. They
else.
go
No,
after
I
it.
don't need rabbits.
No.
I know.
I have
No, in that case, you know, and you may want to, if it's too large, yeah, you can dig it up, but you may also want to maybe transition into a smaller gold
It also
plant
sounds
like a
easier on
chorus.
my back to not dig up a
Yeah.
monster.
Oh, for sure. For sure. Yeah, for sure it is. I mean, those things are really heavy, you know, so a good shovel, like I said, maybe work in place with the hose and rinsing some stuff off. That lightens the load a lot. So, and then once you do have it up, take the top foliage out of it so you have, it just becomes less and less bulky, right? So I'm always trying to reduce the weight. I'm not the strongest guy, so I cut corners like crazy wherever I can where I don't have to lift. So I'm kind of built like olive oil, honestly. So, all right. Carex, wintertime division only from basically, we start all of them at the end of September or October. We'll start watching the weather. This September was a little warm. We pushed them way deeper, almost a month deeper than we would normally start dividing just because the seasons were too hot. In the garden, I probably could have started about that time. In the greenhouses where it's a little bit warmer, I have to be a little bit more considerate of high temperatures and hearing that sort of stuff. You guys were acknowledging how warm it was once we stepped into this place. So it's a nice chilly, well, not too bad outside, but it's a colder winter day. So we're going to take these out once again. It's just like the Muhlenbergias. I'm looking for new growth, and a lot of times these can be difficult. They want to all kind of grow from one growth point, that sort of stuff. This one, all the new growth is coming out this way. There's very little on this back side, which tells me this is probably where the original division started back here, and it's growing out this direction. So I'm gonna kind of play that whole frontage right here because I know that's where all the good new growth is, and I'm just gonna simply kind of start wiggling these down. The cool thing with carex and a lot of the grasses is that they typically want to just start crumbling once you get into them. And there's one division.
But if I dug something up right now, it wouldn't be as dry as that.
Well, that's true, but I would probably water these in also. I like to have a little moisture on the roots, honestly. The plant's the air's dry out there.
But it's not gonna wiggle apart.
Well, that's where the hose and the buckets come in.
Okay.
That's a hose and bucket in the garden are really necessary. In here, even in here, I'm doing a lot of bucket work from this stage. So my crew and I will definitely each have like a couple buckets that we're rinsing the roots off, especially like plants like alstroemeria and stuff like that. Here we're doing a lot of our nursery divisions. The alstroemerias are huge through the cool season. That's the only time we're producing them. So that's kind of all or nothing, but I have to absolutely rinse off those rhizomes and roots in those cases specifically because the amount of roots that are developing aren't all that great. It's, once again, kind of like this plant. It looks like there's a lot going on. Once you get it up above ground, you know, you're usually in shock. So once again, I'm just gonna kind of tease these apart. Nice little clusters. So one pot, our plants, a lot of people are really like, oh, your plants are so expensive. You're getting nice plants. Like this went from $22 to $6. Just like that. And if you bought this plant right now, you could absolutely do that. You know, you're not buying little tiny things that you buy in cell packs that people pot up.
Yeah.
We got nice plants, you know.
So
These
how
are
long
solid.
for each of those 4 divisions to get back to the size
I would,
the whole thing?
in this environment, this is a really nice carex. This is actually from,
Which one is it?
this is one we're calling Pomona. I believe this came from John, what's his name? Greenlee out in Pomona. He's sort of out in California. He's sort of a native grass and grass expert. I think John Greenlee, if I'm not mistaken. Don't quote me on that. But so many people that give us plants here, it's hard to keep up with everything. But he's whoever it is, big ornamental grass guy. I would say a nice cluster like that. Probably like within a year for one of these. You know, we water and fertilize these things a lot, so we always encourage out in the garden feeding the soil, lots of organic matter. Feed the soil and the plants will recover really fast. So there's certain things that we can add to enhance that as well. And I have some of that stuff over here we're going to go through. So that's that sort of thing. All right, continue on here. All right, something I haven't mentioned that I definitely do with all divisions, especially with flowering plants, is we're going to cut all the flowers out.
Just put it in a pot. It's very cute.
But if you have a nice little bud vase, holy cow, look at that. That's so
Adorable.
Oh my God, they're cute. And these ones usually have a really nice sweet fragrance. So they're kind of nice to even keep in your ear if you're, well, the cut smells like garlic. The flower is actually has a sweetness. It's like a sweet nectary smell. Not all of them, but this gets me in the mood for a deli sandwich. Let me tell you, I just the onion. Oh man, this place will be reeking. It's ridiculous. The Nothoscordum and this.
Yeah.
So we're dividing a cool season growing bulb. I would do this for like Lycoris. We were just looking at like Iphions. I do a lot of.
Do this with the
Lycoris radiatus, yeah, all of them are coming up. My Lycoris squamidras were just breaking dormancy maybe about 3 weeks ago, so you know, that sort of stuff. So as things are breaking dormancy, you can do that. They've already flowered and done their thing.
Right.
I got nothing. Mine don't blow.
They're either, so with Lycoris, they either went through a prolonged period of their roots being too dry.
Okay.
That will set them back somewhere about 5 to 6 years if the roots dry out on Lycoris at any time, which is very, I didn't know that until I started growing them. But typically we're going to be dividing winter bulbs this time of year. These break down into individuals. Typically when I'm planting out in the garden or in pots or something, I typically put about 2 to 3 per hill or planting hole. And once again, I've reduced the foliage, and we've also looked at having some really nice little clusters there that will recover. Oh shoot, thank you, I appreciate it. So those break down into either individuals, and
On that,
yeah, what you got?
Could when the greenery first started, leaves first started popping up,
Yes.
could you have done it then?
Yes. Typically, we'll get into this. I was about to get into that with a lot of this stuff. I prefer to do it, say, like a month or so prior to it breaking dormancy. A lot of times I have the plant tag in the garden already, and I have a little work list of when I want to divide things. I have so many plants in my garden, I have to actually keep notes because I don't always remember that I wanted to do something last year at this time. So I come back to my calendar and I'm like, all right, it's time. I wanted to divide that clump right there and put it in this bed, in this spot. Because a lot of times I'm like everybody else, I have a tendency to plant on top of the same spot over and over.
Yeah, you're not the only one.
Yeah, I'm officially a gardener. Yeah, that's like the thing. It's sort of like turning an Erythema Sakokianum flower outwards because they always want to face away from you. So people joke about that in the gardening community. It's hilarious. Yeah, so all right. Cover that up. A lot of times, if I can't get to the plants right away, have a little bucket of water or cover them up with a little bit of soil. That will keep them from drying out. A lot of times we can step away from the plants and just hill them in slightly, something like that. So if I'm working out in the garden, a lot of times I like to use loose leaves. They're really easy. I'll just rake them up, take my divisions, and just throw those leaves, because there's usually a little bit of moisture in them, and just kind of layer them all, and then I can just pull everything out. I also use, I use a mixing bucket. But if you had like a tray, something like this, or a 5-gallon bucket or something, these are kind of nice because you can sort of layer your stuff out in the tray as you're working and carry it to the next spot. So I like these. They're a little bit expensive. You can find them at certain stores. But I use mortar mixing tubs from like Lowe's or Home Depot. They're only like $10 to $20 depending on the sizes you get. So, all right. We're going to get into something a little more difficult, a little more frustrating. This is probably one of the most difficult divisions we do. Very fibrous root system here. And once again, you'll see as I pull this off, there's really not a lot of roots coming out of these new buds, so I have to be very careful. And I would probably dig out a little cluster like this out of the garden. It might, be the roots might be a little more uniformly horizontal versus vertical arrangement, but I'm basically just kind of getting up in the belly of the beast here and jiggling that soil out as best as I can. And this isn't, you can see that's really wet soil, so it's a fairly coarse soil.
Fairly what?
Coarse, yeah.
Okay.
So as you can kind of see here, everything is coming back to one growth point. And it makes everything very difficult. So I'm just gonna give that haircut. And this is a native that everybody wants. So when you have a cluster like this, I would probably wait till my garden clump got, say, about yay big, so I was breaking off pieces that looked about this large, right? Out of a pot, I'll give you the best way to do this, and I'm going to get in here and clean this out really well and open this up. But it's all going to come back to basically one growth point right up in this section here. And you can see there really isn't much going on. I have to really kind of clean up and like open that up to see what I have.
Bucket of water would really
The
help.
bucket of water or your hose is really essential. So I'm actually going to step aside for a second. We're going to go prep this one out. I'm going to go splash some water on it and see how well I can do that, and I'll be right back. All right. All right. And this is kind of a cool visual of the different root structure. So here you have fibrous roots down here, and this is more the coarse structure root up in here. This is where the plant is primarily taking in all of its nutrition, right, and moving it up into the plant. But you can see how everything just kind of comes to one clump like that. And that's a problem. Everybody wants this plant, but it's clonal. So we can't grow this from seed, right? It just doesn't come true. So here, we were having really good success with this plant in our tissue culture lab. I can tell that this was one of our tissue cultured plants by the actual vigor in the growth. All right, so, but years previous, I would have to come in here and we will divide these plants as such. So I'm gonna definitely, with a difficult division like this, I'm gonna have some mishaps, which I call pooches. We're gonna pooch a little here and there for sure. So the first thing I'm looking for is where I want to go in with my knife. Obviously not where all this growth is. So I'm going to be very, very selective. So I'm going to hold that so I don't push down on that new growth. And then I'm going to come up slightly right up underneath here. All right. I'm going to gently pull this apart. So you can kind of see it just wanted the crack there. And I'm going to pull those apart.
It's like untangling my hair.
Man, I don't miss having my long hair, I tell you. It was out of control. I came back from Hawaii and playing in the water, and the clippers came out immediately. I just took it down. I buzzsawed it. It was amazing. It's never been back. But it, you know, people are always like, I wish you would grow your hair out.
Nope.
Only if you brush it and wash it. Yeah. All right, so. Yeah, no, it was horrible. It was brutal. My hair is out of control. All right. So, obviously I have all this stuff here. How do I plant that? So, what I'm going to do is, just like the top's being cut, technically I can root prune this, right? So this is something I wanted to emphasize, and this is why I grabbed this plant. So I want to put the portions back. I don't have to fear doing this. All right. If you look, there's still nice feeder roots all around that thing, and they're all breaking new roots. So you don't really have to keep all this mess. A lot of times this fibrous root system isn't even attached, and now you're putting this mass back in the ground. What happens there is that stuff just dies, and you may also open it up to little air pockets. You might get some mold and stuff like that, and then it just spreads through. So don't be afraid to put the plants back in portions. Something like this, if you shake it and you're not seeing this kind of all shaking down, there's really no reason to break that down anymore. That's a really nice cluster, right? So I would be happy with both of those divisions out in my yard. So. A little bit more difficult to do though.
Yes, so you wouldn't reduce the foliage in the one on the left?
There's really not much to do. If you look really close, these are just brand new little leaves. If I wanted to, I could technically kind of come in here and cut some of these excessive buds off, but I'm gonna see how it transplants first. There's really not much I can do about it. Once I spread it, it's pretty close. It's not ideal, but I have a really I feel very, very confident that's going to be a great division now in the garden, in my experience. Cool. We'll go to one of my favorite natives. This is Cardamine douglasii, or we call them this one. This is bulbosa. This might actually be a different species than I'm used to. Cardamine douglasii grows around here in the woods, and it's usually blooming in early spring. This is a plant we can't grow from seed. Once again, we get a lot of open pollination out in the garden, so they don't come true from seeds. So what we have to do is either take clonal cuttings, which would simply be a leaf cutting, about like that, or we come in, and I would probably have done this, I mean, it's perfectly suitable to do right now, but I probably would have done this just before they broke dormancy.
Which is when? December?
Right now, these just started breaking in the garden probably about 3 weeks ago. So these in the dentarias were just starting to break. So this is going to be a ton of little tuberous bulbs down in here, usually, hence the name bulbosa. And on something like this, we're just going to simply tease these little things apart and take them into nice little crown sections about like that. And if you notice, I've got all these flower buds, so I'm gonna unfortunately do this right now. And people are like, why are you doing this? So by doing that, if I was to leave these in place, all the plant is doing is sending hormones to this bud right now, so it encourages flowering. I want to take all that away, so then it encourages all the roots and foliage to recover. In this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to stick these even out in my garden or in a pot as leaf cuttings. So I'm going to try and reduce some of the larger, fatter leaves off of the base, and we're going to trim that down. And that would be a really nice little division, okay? So we can break these out. This is a magical plant once you have it starting to naturalize. I've put people on this. It's kind of in a hard place to get up at Falls Lake, but when they go there and they see the range of whites, the pinks, the purples, and just hillsides and gulches covered.
And the deer aren't eating them?
No, this is a beautiful plant for that. There's another population of Zephyranthes adamasco that is a ridgeline species that I found right near it that runs super duper dry versus the puddles and seepages. It's really kind of a freaky little area for plants. There's some really neat dentarias where they overlap with this plant and that sort of stuff.
Is that, what sun is that?
This is, so what's beautiful about these plants is they're typically deciduous under canopy. So this time of year, full sun.
Right.
Yeah.
This plant will be going dormant as soon as like the end of May.
Because I have no shade.
Yeah. That's great. I mean, sun, it's a sun lover this time of year. It will be dormant as soon as the soil temperatures start picking up. They're going dormant by...
So would that work in her situation?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Because they're dormant during
Yeah,
the
summertime.
time.
Yeah, exactly. And this time of year, you have all this lovely sun-loving cardamine. So
Because-
they're beautiful. They don't...
Because since she doesn't have trees, I mean, even now, like deciduous shade is not 100% in the winter because you got
Exactly.
a lot of twiggery.
Twigs and stuff like that. There's definitely limb shade. So I would take those bulbs down to that. They're like a ranunculus. They will develop all sorts of little, they look like reptile turds.
So are they
Excuse me.
like the Iphion bulbs or what are
Yeah, so in here, this one actually did not. These were still herbaceous. So these were actually, if you see the bulb, I split down underneath the plant. So it's kind of hard to tell without me rinsing. But basically, underneath was sort of a tap bulb about this big. And the foliage was coming up out of it. So imagine a bulb like sort of right here, and I just split right down the middle. All right, so that's exactly what I did
Now
here.
again, if you had done this when the leaves were just starting to emerge, then there wouldn't have been any flower stalks up.
There wouldn't have been flower stalks. So it's going into flower right off the get-go, however. So if there aren't any there at the time of dividing the plant, there's nothing to remove.
Okay.
If you go back out there and some of your divisions are struggling or aren't looking as full, and you notice that, well, hell, this one's got a bunch of flowers going on, this one not so much, this one's more vigorous, come through and tip them.
Okay.
You know, it's just, yeah, there's no like, you have to do it at that time, but it may be something you want to focus on maybe the first year of the divisions anyhow, just to get it established. So I wouldn't let my stuff flower. I'd probably just, you know, let it go. All right, and
And then those leaves, so how deep do you put those leaves?
okay, cool. That's a good question. What I'll show you what I do is, it's a little bit off topic, but yeah, let's do it. I'll get into a couple things. I'll go over a couple of different hormones and stuff. So there's a couple of things that we use here. This is a talc-based IBA. This is Hormodin. Is the brand. This is their number 3. It's the strongest. I use it on everything from really soft leaf cuttings to really woody material. So it's very adaptable, stores very good in the refrigerator or a cool, dry, dark place. The other that we use a lot of times for the harder, more difficult stuff is now it's called Super Thrive. It's actually formerly known as Dynagrow Rooting Gel. This is a combination of IBA and NAA. So naphthalenoacetic acid, as well as the indole butyric acid. So very, very good hormone for rooting all sorts of different stuff. It smells like periodontitis horribly. Don't want to know what's in it. Started scraping my teeth with plants before I root to see if it was that. No, just being gross. Sorry about that. Yeah, no, it's horrible. It's horrible. But in this case, what we're going to do is I'll have a little bit of this out in the garden. And say this is my little garden plot I wanted. I can just simply get the liverwort out of there before it takes over everything. What I would do is I would probably pre-hydrate this a little bit. So, damn, this is fun. It's like TV. All right, so I'm just gonna kind of pre-hydrate a little bit. I'm just gonna simply come in and give it something like that, and we'll start layering
So you don't
leaves.
need to get the little stem wet first.
No, these are pretty easy. I'll just pull a few of these off. And we do something like that. A little bit of hormone.
Okay.
It's like powdering a pastry, I say. And then just kind of bury them, something like that. I'd water them in really, really good and then just walk away and let them do their thing.
Okay.
If you had like a little cloche or something like that, cool, you could probably put that outside. Just make sure it doesn't get too hot.
Okay.
Yep.
Now.
So leaf cuttings.
Now.
Yeah, what I love is I would do, personally, I would never, I will do this with like larger cuttings like eucomis.
Okay.
This one, if I had the right spot, I would try this. But what I'm typically going to do is use a nice container or a flat like that with soil.
Okay.
I'm gonna get the bang for my buck, you know, and I'm just gonna stack as many in this in one little spot where I can kind of control the moisture a little bit. It's out of the elements a little bit more. If it's something I really, really want, awesome. Huh?
You want to put it in the Ziploc?
No, in this case, I'm just going to leave these open. So I would probably fill this up with just a really good draining soil, and I would probably water the pot in, if it's a really good drainage, probably only like twice a week, you know, just water them in and just kind of keep some moisture on them. We root ours, and I just took trays of 72s and we just stick them in there, so when they do root they just pop right out. So, and they literally by the time we pot the leaf cuttings, they typically look about like little clusters like this that have grown out of a leaf. We'll sit on them for probably about a year.
Okay.
So yeah, yep. Yeah, a lot of our plants, that's the other thing. to get the plants to this size takes us almost a full year in the greenhouses to grow these plants. So a lot of times it's 2-3 years to get them to a sellable size. So, you know, when you're paying for a good cause. This place is unlike any other nursery, so it's all research based and run things through the ringer for sure. You know, it's not going to grow everywhere. We understand that, but we're going to do our best at getting it up. So once again, a lovely winter interest plant. This is not the scordum, another allium ally. And typically some of the easiest divisions you will come across. So, as you can kind of see up in here, we've got a lot of bulbs. And as you can see, you got to be careful where you're digging these bulbs. If you wanted to remove this plant, good luck.
Don't say that.
No, be sure. No, that's the other thing is you come here, I'm gonna tell you what is going to be a mess and what's not. You will never get rid of this. Like I mentioned before, I put this in my lawn. And I love the fact that it breaks up when I go to divide it, right? So there's a good thing and there's a bad thing. So know your place where you're working with the plants. If I'm digging up Stokesia, I know I'm never gonna get rid of it. It root propagates, right? Some of our running asters and stuff like that.
Yes.
Yeah, you're never gonna get rid of them, so be careful. In this case, I'm sure you've grown gladiolas. Maybe the natives or not, but they've developed little cormels, that sort of stuff. There's a lot of things that are very bulbous that'll break off and make little plants that you never get every little bit out. So be careful what you plant and what you get into, because you can see they range in all sorts of sizes, and they are just
Like wild garlic in there.
yeah. So onions are that way. So in this case, I'm not even gonna be gentle with these things. There's literally 50 per square inch. Yeah, exactly. So you're really not gonna mess it up. The other thing here, you notice, I didn't cut the flowers back. It's a ground cover. It's never going to get but this tall. It's also so darn vigorous compared to the larger bulbs, that sort of stuff. So. But kind of it reminds me of like my grandfather's aunt's perfume, you know, something that may have been popular back in the 20s or 30s. It's very kind of just, I don't know how to, I don't know how else to explain it. It's just very old winter fragrance, you know.
Is that blooming in the garden now?
It is. There's some enormous clusters out there that are probably about the size of the table. So imagine just a sea of yellow flowers. It's really a nice thing. And like I said, I like to intersperse this in my Bermuda this time of year. So it's just kind of all over. Summertime it's dormant. So now I have just like pockets of yellows that have naturalized.
So that could go in with zoysia?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great little thing to mix in. So, and you can dig them up, break them up, and just start planting them in like, you know, 18-inch centers. And if you make it your project every winter, it took me about 5-6 years to really get some nice clumps going. So, yeah, and you don't want it everywhere, but I mean, it's nice to have a nice little patch here and there.
Does this be like in a real dry part of the lawn?
I
Because where you have them growing in the garden, it looks like it's one of those super well draining spots.
Well, I mean, our soil's all good, healthy soil. I would have to say that out in the trial beds, they're growing in like a rich, wet loam. In the garden, there's spots where they're up in elevated beds backed up against boulders, so there's probably really good sharp drainage on the backside of that. And they have such a shallow little root system. Typically, if your water table is that high exclusively, you're probably not wanting to put that. So I would say amend the clay, because anytime you have to work the soil. It's a garden, right?
Yeah,
so
it still is clay-based. It's not-
I grew up playing in a lot of adobe. I would say bring in a lot of pine bark soil conditioner, and I honestly like gravel because it doesn't break down, right? So if it's a real big big issue. It makes it kind of hard to break in, and lots of leaf mold. That was great at breaking that stuff up, and gypsum kind of did that. And then get a good soil test so you know what you have to come in and balance it out with. So, but yeah, you can literally make hundreds of these things and just throw them and walk away. All right, a couple things we're going to talk about at the end here is what do I treat these plants with after I'm done? And there's a couple of things that I like to use. We use on a regular basis. These aren't paid endorsements. These are just the things that we use. Once again, I use on every transplant Dynagrow rooting concentrate. This is their kale, and it's a water-based rooting concentrate. It's basically very inexpensive, and it encourages rapid root growth after transplants. And if your plants are just kind of lagging a little bit, sometimes the health of the roots isn't that great. So it may be time to repot, rejuvenate, and then add this stuff. It's basically a tablespoon per gallon. Keep it in the fridge. The garden uses it here. Research uses it here for all their bed transplants. We use it for seedling transplants when we water in all of our fresh transplants, just to kind of give everything a nice boost. Another thing I can't encourage enough is putting some biologicals back in the plant. This can be used on turf, your garden, containers, anything. This is a 3-way biostimulant. This is humic acid, fulvic acid, and acephalum nodosum, which is actually seaweed. Those things symbiotically work really good to increase the resistancy to transplant shock, that sort of stuff. And once again, it colonizes the root zone, builds up vigor in the plant, and they're all essentials that can be brought up. It takes up nutrition a lot more efficiently. So, and then there's one other thing. Let me grab real quick. I focus on these a little bit more when it's warm. This is an old crusty label, but this is a silicone solution. And with a lot of divisions, if you pre-treat, say, for a month or two prior going into the division, a lot of the silicone is brought up into the vascular system of the plant. It hardens all the cell walls and stuff like that. So what it does is promotes less transplant shock on the plant. It's also something, if you have plants that are really hard to get through the hot summer heat, I might start treating a little bit in my garden. I'm typically not a fan of dumping chemicals in my garden, but some of the plants that I have difficulties getting through that kind of melt down in the summer heat, I can actually kind of pre-treat going into summer by watering these plants in, say like once or twice a month. And then they make it through the summer a little bit better. So there are better forms of silicone out there. I'm not sure if Dynagrow has changed their formulation a little bit more, but this is fairly new science over the last like 15, 20 years. So as you can imagine, chemists have made better solutions and find that different forms of potassium silicates work differently. So those are 3 things that I typically use, and that's that. You guys have any questions?
So do you put the orange thing, does that have both of them in there?
It does, and what you can watch, you can use both of these together with a liquid feed. They don't coagulate. If I was to try and, you have to watch the pH of things. If I was to run this with their liquid feed, it coagulates under the chemical reaction. So you have to kind of know what you can mix together and what things you have to maybe like feed on separate intervals so they actually don't solidify. So, but I typically wouldn't use a chemical fertilizer once again in my garden.
Would or wouldn't?
No, I don't. Like I said earlier on, it's all about just feeding the soil twice a year and then let it do the work, so you don't have to ever worry about it. So, but that's that. These are both safe, garden safe. I mean, rooting hormones, I guess, aren't safe, but nonetheless, they are. It's water based. It's not, you know, a chemical base like this or the powder.
So I have this huge pussy willow tree that I need to cut way back. It's
Yep.
doing too much shade. And I was Googling yesterday on how to root pussy willows, and it said after they've rooted in water, don't throw away that water.
Yeah, you can use that. Yeah, willow water.
Would that be something that I could use?
Yeah, so what you're going to use with that is you typically make a fresh willow brew. It's not going to work on everything. You can use honey. There's all sorts of natural rooting hormones. I actually have another one over here. I'll get, let's see, I've got a whole basket of goodies over here. This is Phyto Grow. This is a natural, and this was forget what this was a sample they had sent me. But basically, this is a natural rooting hormone as well. So, are they going to work as fast or are they as effective? No. Are they safer? Yeah.
Something that roots kind of easily anyway.
Yeah, if it's something that's going to root easily, sure, I would say try it.
That's what I thought I'd just
You know, and
experiment.
so even like dormant hardwood cuttings, I would even think about. Like, so I would experiment with something like pomegranates this time of year,
Okay.
maybe Edgeworthia,
Okay.
right?
Doing that, yeah.
Take like some of the nice #2 pencil size basil growth stems,
That's what I was
about yays long, and cut them into, you know, 6 to 8 inch sections. So that's about 8 inches, and that's about 6 inches, somewhere in there. So
Yeah, I do that too.
that's about a foot. Yeah, I think that's close to like 18 inches. Yeah, it's like I'm a freak like that. It's redneck measurements.
I go like this.
Yeah. Fair enough. Well, I know what I'm playing with there. So I would cut them into those sections and maybe soak them for 6 hours, 7 hours. Let that all kind of soak up and absorb.
Okay.
And you could probably use something like that if you needed to as well. It would probably take it up and hold up better. So yeah, the one thing I would say if you're going to do that is sterilize the soil really good. I don't know what it is about Edgeworthia in particular. I find that fungus gnats, we don't really have fungus gnats ever, but as soon as I bring in Edgeworthias, man, for whatever reason, I don't know if it's a smell they give off in the greenhouse or whatever.
To Daphne.
But there's nothing on there except like a bare piece of wood.
Yeah.
It's very strange. I monitor it like daily to see if they're moving in.
Okay.
Luckily right now I have a really good population of beneficials that keep them in check with robber flies. But at home with fungus gnat larvae and stuff like that, be sure to boil the soil prior to you using it. Let it completely cool down. And you can do an instant cool down if you want, but typically I just boil a kettle of water and pour it over that soil. Okay. And that kills all the potential fungus gnat larvae. It doesn't necessarily sterilize the soil, but it takes all those types of pathogens out. If you want to sterilize it, we water pots of water in really good, and I put them in our pots. And then I use these Ziploc, well, I don't use this particular bag, but I will sterilize these in the microwave for about 18 minutes for 4 pots with the bag open.
With the bag open.
In a well-hydrated media.
Okay.
And then you just basically bring the temperature up to 180 for 20 minutes. That's where the bags come in. I seal that down, and then it stays there for that. And then I just keep them in suspension because they're in the freezer. They won't grow any mold or algae, and they're out in the complete dark. Yep. So and then they're on tap whenever I need them.
Okay.
So you can use that sort of thing. That's the world's cheapest greenhouse if you want to root cuttings, that sort of stuff. So yeah.
Just want to make sure you use microwave safe pots for that.
Yeah, that's the thing. Our Anderson pots, yes, good. This little bugger, you couldn't even put like a hot cup of coffee in that thing. Seriously, it would just like, yeah, it was comical when I tried. It was like the shrinky dink. Yeah, it was awesome. Yeah, it was like contortion. It made some interesting containers. So yeah, like Escher pots. Lock up. So that's our discussion on dividing wintertime evergreens and wintergreens. So thank you for attending. It's been great. Any other questions we have? Wrap it up.
Could you divide hellebores now? Like a
Okay.
big, huge clump?
Ah,
I don't know
very
if
good
it's-
question.
I don't know
So
if it's all the same plant or it's got
yes. So a lot of these newer ones, it's a great question, are sterile, right? So and they've done a great job compared to like hybridus or fetidus or in a lot of these Nigers and stuff like that we've played with for so many years. The breeding's gotten really, really good. Good posture, good sterility, good flower abundance. However, you don't get that proliferation of vomited seed everywhere. So not that we want that, because phenotypically they're not going to come true, right? For the most part. Now, a lot of like the newer breeding that Walters has done, they've used a lot of the enhanced genetics that have been selected over years. So we're finding that those are all seed clones that are actually seed strains, I should say. So there's a little bit of variability if you look in the phenotype of flowers, but typically in that strain, there's a selected acceptance, I should say. So they're getting better in that regard. However, if you have one that is one of the newer hybrids that you can't really grow from seed, divisions are the way you have to go. Now, I would probably wait till the plant was about 3 to 5 years old and maybe about the size of a volleyball or so, or getting to about that size at the crown. What it's going to do is it'll probably divide a lot like this, not on such a thick scale, but it's going to be a slightly more condensed scale. You're going to have a really tight root ball, especially concentrated underneath that crown.
Okay.
They're very difficult to get into without breaking eyes and stuff. But that's typically, when I think about it, that may be where I started transitioning from top divisions to coming up from underneath the plant. So outside, I'm definitely going to have the hose.
Okay.
I'm going to really study the crown to minimize all that division damage and stuff that you would normally have.
Okay.
If it's a hellebore hybridus, same sort of thing. You know, we can't grow it clonally from seed, and you have this outlier that you want to share with everybody. Sure, you can dig that up and divide it. I would probably start them usually around like October, November.
Okay.
Okay. And then they can go all the way, because typically they start putting on their root growth late summer, early fall. You start getting new activated roots, and then typically as early as around Thanksgiving to early Christmas, you start getting the new foliage, and you might start getting flowers right now, that sort of stuff. So yeah, it's all over the place. So I would typically do it prior to flowering. Late fall, early winter is best. And that gives them time to establish before the summer heat. I don't even like planting hellebores out of a 4-inch pot really any later than May. I think May is really late. Honestly, I would never even think about that. So,
Okay.
yep.
Yeah, I mean, you know, because if it's
Or at least here.
hybridus ones and it has seeded, and so I don't know if that's all the same plant. It's
not.
A lot of different seedlings. and
It's
they
going to be
all see
open
different
pollinated.
colors.
Yep.
But if it's bigger than what I want there,
Yep.
or I don't want all those colors in there,
Yeah.
I thought, what do I have to lose?
Yeah, so what you're going to do, you're going to want to clear out as many of those seedlings. Or in my case with the hellebores, I have so many, you never know what you're going to get. So I'll let them go until I actually get a
Sometimes you
flower
Sometimes
confirmation.
you get a good seed.
Yeah,
great seed.
exactly. So I wait till I get a flower confirmation. If it's gone, just yeah, just rip them right out. So,
Yeah.
and if I see like a cluster is coming out kind of a certain phenotype, it's like I'll just let the breeders do their work. The chances of me finding that great seedling at this point is probably pretty low on that particular.
Of them
Yeah, and it's been passed around for hundreds of years. So, but yeah, if I found something that looked legit, if it was variegated seedling with a good margin or something like that, yeah, I'd keep it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, good questions. Yeah, you good? Well, thanks again. It's been nice having everybody, and hopefully you guys can all come out and we'll tear some plants up next time. All right.
Sounds like fun.
Yeah.
Sounds like a lot of fun.
All right.
Yes.
Thanks. Bye-bye, everybody.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Now you can go out in the cold. Hopefully you didn't get too hot.